spouses Rose and Fred West. The only thing worse than serial killers is their union. For 20 years no one had any idea what was going on at number 25 Cromwell Street in London. There seemed to be an unremarkable family living there, Rose and Fred West and 8 children. Meanwhile, the unfortunate offspring huddled in a dark basement. Their father molested them, and their mother beat them mercilessly. The spouses were united by a penchant for violence, perversion and torture. After the remains of 5 victims were discovered in the basement of the House of Horrors, they were tried and sentenced to life in prison. The investigation found that together they killed 10 people, but Fred, who became adept at dismembering animal corpses at the slaughterhouse, was 12 years older than Rose and had worked in the trade before. For example, he killed an unwanted bride. He met Rose when she was underage and made her into a prostitute so that he would have something to live on. Both grew up in unhealthy families. Rose had schizophrenics in her family, and Fred had a too close relationship with his mother. Usually they lured young tramps home, tempting them with warmth and food, and there they raped, recorded everything on video, and got rid of the victims. The crazy couple also killed their own children, Heather and Charmaine. The Wests were arrested only in 1994. Fred later hanged himself, and Rose is still serving a life sentence. If all these terrible facts are not enough, read the revelations of their daughter Mae West. She co-authored her memoir, Love You, Mom, with Neil McKay. My parents are Maniacs, Fred and Rosemary West, which will make you want to cry with empathy for a girl who grew up in such a nightmare. Richard Ramirez, rapist and murderer. Richard Ramirez is better known as the Night Stalker. The number of his victims exceeded 3 down. Although it only took investigators a year to detain him, he broke into houses and right there raped, tortured, beat and took the lives of people from 6 to 60 years old. He painted the walls at crime scenes with satanic symbols. Ramirez was the 5th child in the family of a former police officers and a Mexican immigrant. As a child, he suffered from epilepsy and attacks from peers. His closest relationship with his family was his older brother, a Vietnam War veteran. Miguel told the younger Ramirez a lot about the horrors of the front and even showed pictures of mutilated soldiers. At age 13, Richard witnessed Miguel shoot his wife in the face. The teenager withdrew into himself, dropped out of school, became involved in the occult, and became addicted to drugs. To earn a living, he robbed houses, and soon lost control and began to rape and kill those he robbed. Thanks to the fact that one of the victims survived, it was possible to create an identikit of Ramirez and catch him. Nature endowed Richard with a pleasant appearance, and, even despite all his crimes, the girls wrote letters to him in prison for many years. He even got married while in prison. The criminal was sentenced to death, but it was not carried out. Philip Carlo personally communicated with one of the most brutal killers and wrote a book about him, The Night Stalker, in which he tried to find out what pushed Ramirez to commit bloody crimes. Dennis Rader. This famous maniac managed to hide from justice for 30 years. Inspired by the story of Harvey Gladman, another terrible killer from the United States, Dennis Rader began torturing animals as a child. However, this did not stop him from finishing school, rising to the rank of staff sergeant in the Army, getting married, raising 2 children, and earning a Bachelor of Science degree in justice. In 1974, he committed his first mass murder. He broke into a house and took the lives of a family of 4. Some unknown prisoner soon took credit for his deed. Rader learned about this from the news and became furious. He craved attention and recognition, so after each crime, he began sending anonymous letters to the police with details that only the culprit could know. I signed letters BTK, from the English verbs bind to bind, torture to torture, kill to kill. At the end of 1979, Rader announced that he was going to commit suicide, but in fact he lay low. He was arrested in 2005, when he again decided to communicate with the investigation. How many he actually killed over 30 years is unknown, but he was imprisoned for 10 proven deaths. He is still serving time. Interestingly, when Rader began killing, the detective who eventually caught him, Kenny Landwehr, was a teenager. The boy was so frightened by the news that he decided to become a policeman and fight evil. Read more about this in the documentary thriller Bind. Torture, Killed by Roy Wenzel. L. Kelly, Laviana Hurst and Tim Potter. Joseph Franklin. Joseph Franklin is the pseudonym of James Clayton Vaughn Jr., one of the most brutal racist maniacs. He grew up in a poor family of alcoholics. Adults did not pay attention to him. As a child he wandered around the street all the time, and later joined the National Socialist Party and the Ku Klux Klan. At the age of 26, he took a new name in honor of Hitler's follower Joseph Paul Goebbels, and a surname in honor of the American politician Benjamin Franklin. Joseph called himself the Cleaner, dreamed of inciting a race war, killing then-as President Jimmy Carter and black human rights activist Jesse Jackson. He began with attacks with tear gas or a machete, and then shot the victims with a rifle or shotgun, hunted African Americans and Jews, mixed couples. In 1978, he wounded the publisher of the pornographic magazine Hustler, Larry Flynt, who remained disabled. In addition to murders, he robbed banks 12 times. He was found with a Nazi eagle tattoo on his arm and sentenced to death. Only before his execution did Franklin say that he regretted what he had done. The famous criminologist John Douglas spoke about the search and capture of the mass murderer in the book Shadow of the Killer. It was he who became the prototype for FBI agent Jack Crawford in the thriller The Silence of the Lambs by Thomas Harris. Michelle Notek. Female serial killers are less common, but they are more brutal than men. That was Michelle Notek. Together with her husband, she tortured them for years. They left them without food for a long time, forced them to maim themselves, poured bleach on their abrasions, and subsequently killed the people, not random strangers, but guests of their home. Right in front of the three daughters Nikki, Sammy, Tori. All these horrors were happening. The third victim was Michelle's nephew, who was shot by her husband. The woman was an accomplice in this case. For many years, the couple answered questions that their guests had simply fled to other states. They were believed because no one suspected the family neighbors of bloodthirsty maniacs. The daughters constantly received physical and psychological punishment, but they were afraid to share it with anyone. Only when they grew up did they want to free themselves from the past and told the story of growing up in the shadow of a psychopath to true crime. Writer Greg Olson. This is how the book Don't Tell Nobody was born. The true story of sisters who grew up with a murderous mother, which became an Amazon bestseller. The Notek sisters' biggest fear is that after serving time, their mother will continue to commit murders. After all, the criminal was sentenced to only 22 years in prison.